Hey guys, it's Ross over at the Daily Jaws, back again with another exclusive interview. Today, I'm talking to two really important people in the world of shark conservation. I'm speaking to Charlie Morris and Frankie Chipparoni, who are producing a fantastic new shark documentary called The Last Shark. Now, before we dive into the topic, I have to make clear that this is nothing to do with the 1981 brilliant Italian Jaws ripoff of the same name, The Last Shark. When I say brilliant, I'm obviously being sarcastic. It's a terrible movie, but you should definitely watch it if you want a bit of a laugh. But anyway, guys, please take some time out to welcome Frankie and Charlie to the Daily Jaws. Guys, welcome.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, guys, obviously you are now working on this documentary called The Last Shark, and it's a very exciting time for you because you're premiering tomorrow. How are you feeling?
So we actually premiere Tuesday the 7th.
Okay.
And honestly, we could not be more excited. The community, I'm here in South Africa, so I apologize for the lighting. Just as we hit record, we did hit load shedding here, so that's why I don't have any background light at the moment. But yeah, we couldn't be more excited. The community momentum that's been built around this movie here is just so surreal. So not only do we have the premiere this Tuesday, but it's followed by close to 16 screenings already lined up, not only in Cape Town, but across South Africa.
That's amazing. Charlie, could you tell us a little bit about The Last Shark?
Wow. That might be too broad of a phrased question.
Okay, let me rephrase. What is The Last Shark about?
Gosh, I hate to defer to Frankie, but I feel like Frankie has such a better answer because I'm sorry, you threw me a softball and I'm chucking it over to Frankie. Go
Okay,
for it,
Frankie, let's pass that softball to you. Frankie, what can you tell us about this fantastic documentary, The Last Shark?
So, The Last Shark is really an investigative documentary looking into the disappearance of great white sharks from South Africa's coast. I mean, as we know, South Africa used to be known as the great white shark capital of the world, and especially this town just 2 hours east of Cape Town called Gainsbaai was really the mecca of great white sharks. And they used to bring in over $4 million a year alone, just this tiny town in ecotourism for great white shark cage diving. So people from truly all over the world would come here just to have the chance to see great white shark. However, since 2014, they've seen not only like a decline in sightings, but in more recent years, a complete absence. So they've gone years without seeing a great white shark. This year in Gainsbaai, they had around 7 sightings, but that's pretty crazy to think, considering the fact that in like 2011 and previous years, shark diving operators would go out and see over 30 individuals a day. So not only are we investigating the disappearance of this majestic and beautiful creature, but we're also calling for a transformation of the KwaZulu Natal shark boards, which is a government organization that lies on more the eastern coast of South Africa, so kind of closer to Mozambique, and around like 300 kilometers of this coastline, they have over 37 netted beaches and 177 drum lines. So we're calling for a transformation of this organization to change to protect both humans and sharks. And also just, an overall perception change of sharks for us to humans, to really see them for these critical creatures that we need for our ecosystems, to give them the respect that they deserve.
And what I would add to that, Frankie rounds that out so perfectly. And I was thinking, additionally, this movie is like we want people to fall in love with sharks, and we really sort of we kind of tackle head on, how much we're afraid of sharks as humans. And we kind of dive into that. Oh, that's a great pun. We dive into that in the story by talking to shark experts, shark scientists, people who just love sharks, period, are in this film. I think there's 13 different interviews. There's 13 individual people who are kind of spread throughout the movie who talk about everything from how they fit into the food web, how the ecosystem depends on a apex level predators and what happens if the sharks go.
Hmm.
And then equally, we talk about people who just talk about the beauty of sharks, and they've spent their lifetime diving with white sharks, and they swim with them, right out there in the open, which surprises a lot of people. Most people probably assume that you only hang out with great whites when you're in a cage. We've got some fairly legendary people in the movie as well, that are well known in the shark world. So to me, it's sort of like a love story for sharks. It's our homage to sharks, and it just really explores the shark and human relationship and how we got to a point where we're at now, where basically, like, something that I arrived at through working on the movie is I came into this story knowing nothing about sharks. I only knew one thing: I'm terrified of sharks. That's all I knew. And then through spending time with the transcripts of the interviews, I inherited all this footage from South Africa. Frankie was there for the original filming, but I was not. So I was brand new to this whole topic. And kind of what I came up to realizing through working on the movie is, like, this whole problem exists. These nets are only out in the water for one reason and one reason only. It's because people are terrified of sharks, and they feel like, I can't go out in that water unless there's a shark net. And somehow for South Africa, they're like, we don't care if all the other countries in the world except Australia don't have shark nets. We need shark nets, or I'm not going out there. And so it really explores that fear. And we hope that we've created something that really makes people go, you know what, we need sharks, and I need to get on board with this. Like, even if I'm afraid of them, I have to support sharks because it's about the whole ecosystem. So yeah, that's what I would say the movie is about.
That's amazing. The thing is, throughout the course of the Daily Jaws, because we've been going now for about 8 years, and we do get to speak to shark experts and documentary filmmakers and things, and the passion really comes through. But what's really unique, I think, about your story, Charlie, is the fact that you didn't really know anything about sharks, and you were very much like many other people coming to the world of sharks, if you like. You were terrified of them, but through information, whether that's through documentary, studying books, speaking to experts, whatever, just through the knowledge, the ignorance starts to dissipate, and you start to understand the true nature of these animals and their importance to the ecosystems, like you're saying, and things like that. And there are so many different threats that impacts not just sharks, but the oceans in general. But obviously you guys have picked a very specific threat to these animals. What is it that inspired you to sort of try and tackle this problem sort of head on, rather than say tackle something else?
So as Charlie mentioned, I was here originally for filming 2 years ago. The original director is from Gainsbaai in Cape Town. And what happened was he was working for Sea Shepherd, particularly on the Kita campaign, for about 3 years. And he came back home to Cape Town and realized, oh my God, there hasn't been a white shark sighting here in over 2 years. Like, felt like, a piece of his heart was missing. There's been this whole problem, and he's been missing out on it by working on the other side of the world. So he called me up because I have a lot of experience in marine research, and I started just kind of like digging into stuff and looking at what is going on, and we decided to really kind of call for the transformation of the shark boards, particularly because it all begins with perception. And the reason that what ended up happening is, after filming, the original director got his dream job. He's now doing incredible work. He's working in anti-poaching in Kruger National Park. He's like protecting the rhinos and elephants out there every day in the bush. And so last year I ended up going back to see, and I was witnessing the shark bycatch and mortality firsthand on the commercial fishing vessels. And it was like, man, if people think that, like, have this perception that, they need a net to even get into the ocean, and that the ocean is theirs and not the shark's home, or, the whales, the dolphins, everything, like other living creatures' home, how are we even going to begin to get them to care about what's going on in the commercial world, in the shark fin trade, and all these other massive issues that not only sharks, but a lot of creatures in the ocean are really facing. So it really starts kind of with the nets. It starts with changing perception and education. And so that's kind of why we targeted the nets, and we're asking for this policy change.
And if you don't mind me jumping in here, Ross, to add to that, I think, and you'll notice this is how things go. I pretty much always defer to Frankie. She's like the Uber director and I'm the co-director, because, you know, I mean, Frankie was just sitting there knowing there's a hard drive in South Africa with all this info on it, and it sat there derelict for over a year. And Frankie really just said, okay, but we got to make this happen. I got to find an editor. And so she's really the one that works in the ocean space and knows the most about it. So I always defer to her first. But I'd like to add that, you know, it was a tricky movie to make because, you know, a lot of the people that were interviewed were like, well, it's not just the nets. It's the commercial fishing. It's the illegal fishing. It's the illegal shark fishing trade. It's longliners. It's everything. Why make a movie just about that? And what Frankie and I decided was, well, number one, a movie with all those topics is going to get this long and be too long and too deep in the weeds. And out of all those other things, this is the one thing that is ridiculous and we can do something about. There's a net right out there on the tourist beaches. All you got to do, pull that net out of the water and change policy, and things change. It's not hard to do. But when you think about commercial fishing, wow, that feels pretty hard. That feels like really complicated. But so we just decided to really narrow the focus down to this one topic and hope that can change. Also, it's less overwhelming for the viewer, where they're like, oh, one topic, one call to action, change the thing with the nets. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really smart thing to do because, as we said before, you know, there's a lot of threats, you know, very, very real threats. So, you know, it's not just, as you say, affecting sharks, but, you know, the ecosystem as a whole. And I think, but particularly what sort of separates sharks, I think, probably more than any other animal, is what we've been sort of alluding to and talking about, which is the perception of these animals. And obviously, Charlie, you're coming in from a very specific place. You know, you're very terrified of sharks and not particularly educated about it. Whereas Frankie, obviously, you're a marine biologist, so you're coming from the same thing, but from completely different places. Which brings me to probably the key question for my audience: what are your thoughts on Jaws? And do you think you can be a Jaws fan and a shark lover at the same time?
Oh man, let's just keep it going. You first, Frankie.
Gonna throw me under the bus every time, aren't you, Charlie?
Throwing you under the shark.
Do you want me to go first, Frankie?
No, I can go first.
Okay.
I think, you know, it's so hard because obviously we can't deny that Jaws has created a global fear, you know, like people who are landlocked like myself. I mean, I grew up in Chicago, so nowhere near the ocean. That was probably, you know, I would say Jaws was probably my first time, you know, seeing a shark or something like that. I can't think of another time or another movie where I would have seen a shark.
Not even Sharknado?
Not even Sharknado. I think it's tricky because when you see it young, it does plant that seed. And that's why so many of us have that fear, is because it is such a media phenomenon and such a globally spread film. But at the same time, like, I won't lie, I love the Megalodon, but I love it because it's a ridiculous movie and it's just kind of funny. But it's the same as watching like another horror or ridiculous movie, you know, like, and I think we need to view it as that rather than as, oh my gosh, this is what, you know, real sharks are like. And the other thing is, you know, we know how media can be so exaggerated, right? But it's interesting how with Jaws has created this, like, the media has continued to play into this like global fear. And so I mean, as you know, like shark attacks, you know, the annual statistics is there's 5 fatal shark attacks a year, right? 5 fatal shark human incidences a year. But then there's 200,000 2,000 hippo
deaths.
Man, a little late for me. Yeah.
Attacks.
attacks to humans a year. There's so many other deaths. I mean, you're more likely to die in a car, like, or by a toaster than by a shark. So it's also interesting how, because of Jaws, the media still really plays into these shark attacks when it's really not that common at all. You know, for every human that's killed by a shark, over 16 million sharks are killed by a human. So I think it's a really hard line to draw for people. But I mean, you don't see movies about spiders and you're like, well, okay, maybe you do, and you're really scared, but you don't see Sharknado, for example, or the Megalodon, and you're like, oh my God, this is real, you know? So we need to find that line of education for sure. But I haven't seen Jaws in a while, but I have seen the Megalodon like quite a few times in the past year because it always gives me a good laugh.
Charlie, so where do you stand on the whole Jaws shark lover kind of topic? Where's the line straddling for you?
Well, your fans will like my answer. Jaws is a masterpiece of storytelling. I love Jaws. And Jaws is the reason why I am terrified to go into the ocean. Like, I grew up bodyboarding and I didn't think about it much. Like, it took a while to catch up with me, but I grew up bodyboarding in the Carolina coast here in the USA. And I loved it. Like, summers were all about bodyboarding and body surfing, and I was really into it. And it was weird. It wasn't until I had kids and I saw my kids playing the ocean that I would literally just be scanning the entire time. Where's the fin? Where's the fins? Yeah. And I was like, I'd literally just be like, why did I watch Jaws? So I think that what would be great that the media did is if it just somehow said, Jaws is storytelling fun, but it is not a truth all about sharks. But I really grew up thinking that's how great whites actually are. That's not just a movie. They just portrayed what sharks actually want to do, eat humans. That was my perception. And so, like, at this point, through this movie, I've come all the way over to being like, yeah, I would swim with sharks. Like, I would absolutely do it now. You know, if I ever make it over to South Africa, if we have funding and someone wants to take me out, I would absolutely do it, as long as Frankie was there to watch my back. But I would go and I would try it out.
It's fascinating that you give that answer. The reason being is that and this was something that the author of Jaws also experienced, Peter Benchley, while he was still alive. It seems to be a really split audience in terms of fear and fascination. And if you watch Jaws as an adult, particularly as a parent, you really fear sharks. But the kids that watch Jaws, they are absolutely fascinated by sharks. They're absolutely, I mean, they probably watch it for the blood and the guts and the gore, just as I did when I was little, but they're fascinated by sharks, and they think that these are amazing creatures. And I think, to Frankie's point and about the whole media thing, how it's, particularly in the UK with our tabloid press, how everything is, whenever a shark is in the paper, it's the Jaws effect, or it's a horror, or it's a terror, or whatever it is. And it's like, nothing happened. A shark happened to swim by, and it was probably a harmless species because of where we are. But I think what happens is, because of the sensationalism around sharks, it's a very easy sell for a newspaper. Very, very easy. And as soon as you put something like that on, some kind of sensationalist headline or whatever, whenever you look on the BBC website or a news website, normally, if there's a shark-related story, it's normally in the top 4 or 5 stories that are being clicked on. So there's definitely something in there. But you're right. I think one of the things that we try to do in some of the literature that we write about when it comes to shark stuff, rather than use the word shark attack, we use shark encounter, because that's kind of what it is. Which absolutely. And recently there was I think it was actually caught on camera. Sadly, a boy, I think it was about 21 years old, got killed by a tiger shark in Egypt. And this was it was a shark attack in a very similar area that happened, I think, maybe a year or so ago. It was almost identical in terms of location and events. And people started sharing the video of this guy basically dying on camera. And we wrote a piece about that is just morally reprehensible. We shouldn't be doing that. You know, this is someone's son, someone's boyfriend, or whatever. But it's very sensational, and it's a very, very easy thing. So when people like yourself come along and go, right, well, we're going to, try and educate people about the reality of sharks and their behavior. We're also going to educate you on a very specific threat. I think it's just amazing, amazing work. And it's great to see so many people taking on these challenges and looking at these individual threats to sharks, and hopefully collectively educating a nation. And hopefully at some point we'll just go, okay, enough's enough. Hashtag and this is something we have to post from time to time, Jaws is not a documentary. It's an entertainment. Yeah, there is a little bit of creative license there, and there is some, some accuracy there. Research was done and stuff, but there is you have to understand that it's a movie. But I think the tide is changing through the work of like people like yourself.
Something that popped in my head as you were talking is, I believe that this man's name is Joshua Slocum. It might have been Joseph Slocum, but around 1895, he sailed a boat around the world. He was the first known human to circumnavigate the whole globe in a sailboat. I believe it was called the Sea Spray, or maybe just the Spray. He took off from around Nantucket. And I read his book in the last year. And what was really fascinating is this was before the movie Jaws existed. And in his memoir, every time this guy comes across a shark, he goes out of his way to kill that shark. He hates sharks. And you can tell that most of the sailors he encounters all have the same view about sharks. I think for us as humans, this fear of sharks existed way before Jaws existed, actually. I think that we're just super terrified of something that can just take us out of the water and possibly kill us easily. It's just fascinating, though, that we don't hold the same fear about lions. It's probably because we want to swim in the ocean. We don't want to swim in the desert where the lions are, or the savannah. So it's just different, but yeah. So I was reading your threads from your videos. I was reading a bunch of comments the other day, and I was really surprised by how many people were saying that the movie Jaws turned them into conservationists and turned them into people who grew to love sharks. I was just like, wow. And that's why this was a while ago. Like, I didn't reach out to you. You reached out to us actually through our website. I don't know how you found us.
I just Googled the Lost Shark team. I think there was something that came up in Google, and literally, yeah, you're right. I just emailed just like, how can we help? That was it.
Wild.
That's all we needed to know. Yeah.
Like, I was looking over your thing months ago, and I even talked to Frankie. I was like, Frankie, check this out. People who love Jaws now like say they like sharks. And I was like, this guy does this whole thing. So when you wrote to me, I was like, Frankie, this is the guy. So it's pretty cool that we're talking.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really crazy. We were checking out your website at first, and we were really looking into it especially because in our film, one of our most amazing interview subjects, Shark Lady Kim, a local cage diving operator and like shark conservationist here in South Africa, ended up doing work with Valerie Taylor. And so she talks a lot about her actually in the film, and
amazing.
It's just incredible. Like, and the conservation work that Valerie Taylor ended up doing after the film is also just absolutely incredible. And our interview subject, Shark Lady Kim, was there with her and it was actually what they were testing was a electrical barrier to use instead of the shark nets, and the shark nets are still there, but they really found like a valid solution. And it's just such a shame that years later this technology that could protect both humans and sharks is still not being used, even though it was developed and tested here within South Africa. And it's not the only one. There's a number of other alternatives that have been tested and are working even within South African waters, yet these shark nets still there, and the drum lines. And it's not only South Africa, it's also Australia. And that's why this film is especially important, because the sharks here migrate all the way up to Australia's coast. So they are just facing threat after threat after threat.
Yeah. And I think as well, there's quite the argument about the whole nets versus sort of new technology. It kind of reminds me of the energy argument right now in terms of fossil fuels versus sort of green energy and things like that. It's like part of the reason I think why people maybe don't transition is, one, they're maybe a little bit afraid of change. Potentially it could be that there's a massive amount of infrastructure that would need to change in order to make that sort of transition complete. But also I think a lot of it just comes down to there's a lot of people making probably quite a lot of money from these nets or from these methods or whatever it is, and therefore no one really wants to rock the boat. And we're not sort of shouting corruption or anything like that, for sure, but these are things that I think are genuine problems that are exacerbating the problems or the direct threats it's facing sharks. And I think that because I was very lucky, I got to speak to Valerie Taylor a couple of years ago about her documentary, Playing the Sharks, which is, honestly, it was a last minute thing, but it was only because the producer of that documentary followed the Daily Jaws, and we've sort of said, listen, we want to speak to Valerie and get the word out about this amazing documentary that she's making. She said, cool, we'll get you a 20-minute slot. We ended up talking for like nearly 40 minutes, which was incredible. But Valerie was saying the same thing about policy. And it's not just about the actual threat, it's the other aspects that impact those threats and that enable those threats to continue. And it's a fresh thinking, fresh perspective, or a change in politician or whatever it needs to take to really make these changes, which is why films like yours allow the public to see the reality and then hopefully lobby and pressure the people that need to be lobbied and pressured in order to actually make the change, or else step aside and let someone else step up who is actually serious about this problem.
Something that occurred to me last night, like now that the movie, so I've exported the movie to South Africa, the projectionist is getting it ready. So suddenly my work has just dropped off and I'm having finally like time to have other thoughts and other realizations that aren't on a, video editing software timeline. And one of the things that occurred to me is, so like policies that support profit, commercial trawling, those things, sharks are being killed by those measures because people are trying to make money, right? So you've got people trying to make a living versus conservation. But something that occurred to me about this, specifically these nets, these gill nets off the coast, it's one of the only instances where we're specifically saying as humans, we're going to kill these sharks because we're afraid. And so that makes great whites and other sharks the only species on the planet that we're killing simply because, not because they're food, not because we're trying to profit, because we're just afraid of sharks. I was just like, wow, that's a lot. That's a huge environmental impact just because you're scared of something. And I was just like, wow, we're really fearful creatures,
But fear is a powerful weapon, isn't it? Particularly on a population, really. And you've got a media machine that keeps perpetuating that really unfair image of a particular animal. Where is the film at the moment in terms of process? Kind of where are you guys?
Well, I exported. I'll take this one first for a change, Frankie. I finished it about yesterday at 9 a.m. I exported it to the projectionist at the premiere location in the theater in Cape Town, and there's an unlisted version on YouTube that Frankie can use for screenings and stuff. But basically, it's done, and now we're just doing tons of outreach, and Frankie's just got a whole, well, Frankie can tell you about all the stuff she's doing, but in terms of process, my part as co-director and editor my part's done in that regard. And it's weird. like what do I do with my entire life now? I will say one fun thing though. I can't give out any names because that would be a spoiler, but we are talking to some very interesting people who are interested in screening the movie at some really fascinating locations, but we probably shouldn't say more than that. But it's very exciting. So I think people are going to be hearing about it for a while. And our big hopes for it is that it'll be seen in sort of the kinds of places where policy change happens, where decisions are made. So it's very exciting, but yeah.
And what about you, Frankie? Obviously, the torch has kind of been passed to you. What have you got planned for The Last Shark sort of in the immediate future beyond the premiere?
So actually this whole month we have free screenings all across Cape Town. One of the big things that we really wanted to make sure within South Africa, obviously there's a lot of inequality. So we wanted to make sure that this film and this educational film is accessible to anyone and everyone here, and that there's no problem with being able to watch and learn from it. So I'm doing a lot of different activities with a lot of different kids here, getting in some schools, as well as like truly, screenings across Cape Town, across the Eastern Cape. I'm setting up virtual screenings across in KwaZulu Natal, especially where the shark boards are, the shark nets are. And I'm looking at extending, if we can get the funding, I will be extending my trip and actually going up there and making sure that not only I'm getting in the schools, but also just really across all of the beaches where those nets are, to make sure that people there can see them, can see the movie.
That's amazing. It's so great that you've made this accessible as well to as many people, because the more people that see it, the more education, the more information, hopefully that turns the dial in the right direction in terms of shark perception is concerned. That's fantastic.
And also, like, I grew up watching all the Shark Week stuff on Discovery Channel, all those things. I've always loved those shows. And I mean, I never thought I'd make a shark movie for sure. But I just feel like what we've come up with here, because the quality of what the interview subjects is saying, like, one of the people in our movie is also Andre Hartman, who you might know of.
I know Andre
One of the,
Hartman,
yeah, so Andre is in there. I mean, Frankie got to hang out with Andre. He's such a great guy. And like, the way he talks about the great white, it just, I mean, it makes it almost makes you cry. Like, he just loves the animal so much. And so I just haven't seen a movie like this before. And I don't even know how it got made, to be honest. It's almost like when you do a bunch of free writing and you're like, wow, I wrote that. How did I do that? That sounds good. So it's kind of like that. Like, before we knew it, we had, like, when we sent out the rough draft to people, I mean, it was rough. No music, terrible visual, terrible sound, 45 minutes long. Now it's an hour and 21. And people cried when they saw it. They actually cried when they saw it. And I was like, whoa, what? Like, wow. And so it's because we're really trying to help restore our relationship with sharks in this film. And because of the people that we interviewed say it in such personal ways, that I think it really comes across in a much different way. A lot of movies, like, I had a friend recently who worked at National Geographic, and I hope she doesn't hear this because she might be offended, but she worked in National Geographic in the oceans department. And I was telling her that I was struggling with adjusting the audio, because this is the first movie that I've ever done all the audio for and all the color grading. Normally I hire that out. Oh, but we had a budget of $0, by the way. Everyone who has worked on this movie has done for $0. None of us have made a penny, which means we didn't have a budget to have anyone better than me do the audio. So I was complaining to my friend about the levels. And she was like, oh, well, just mute what the people are saying and just show the shark footage. That's all anyone cares about, is the underwater beautiful footage. And I was like, oh, no, that's not this kind of movie. This is very, very different. And I think she's right. Most conservation films rely heavily on gorgeous 4K, beautiful, beautiful footage where the audience is, like, in awe and wonder. This narrative is not that kind of a movie. It's a hit you in the heart and mind kind of movie, not just like, wow, they're beautiful, let's save them. So it's also a lot of investigative journalism. It kind of plays off like that as well. So yeah, anyway.
Well, speaking to you both, it's great, because I think the thing is, if we're going to change the perception of these creatures, people like you are the gateway to that perception, to the real way we should be looking at these creatures and the way we should be appreciating them, and then going, okay, actually, that's not what I thought it was. So now I need to take some kind of action to try and save these creatures before they're gone. So what can people do beyond watching the movie? What can they do to help with this specific cause?
Yeah, I think Frankie's got that question.
So I think it definitely starts with watching the movie, and we're really excited because we've attached a QR code link not only at the end of the movie, but on all of our merch as well, to make sure that people have somewhere to go. And there we have free shark courses where people can learn more about sharks, more like great shark documentaries to go and learn about. We're going to be putting up a petition to not just to take the nets out, because we don't want to cause any unemployment. And this is a really, like, high funded organization within South Africa. But there are a lot of ways that they can transform and even increase employment and increase education through this employment as well. So we're promoting a lot of different alternatives that can be used, that should be used. So we're trying to call for action in that way. And yeah, and then again, just the community momentum, because it's exactly what you said, you know, these policies that have just been in place for too long. It's almost like the American government, you know, it's like, get out, it's time. You gotta move on at this point. And, and so it's really that. It's time for a change. And the time to act is now, you know. I'm sure you know this, but the great white shark global population hovers between 3,000 to 5,000.
Yeah.
And that is terrifying. And the fact that more people don't know about that is equally as terrifying. So, you know, these shark nets alone are killing 20 to 30 great whites a year. And these great whites take 30 years to sexually mature. So we are like, I think when we were making this movie, what really hit me is that I was coming back to South Africa, and that I'm doing all this work with kids. And not only are they growing up in the place that used to be the mecca for great white sharks, like not only do they not know that, and they'll never understand that, but they'll, like, I could see, you know, we could see this species go extinct within our lifetime. Like, that's extremely possible. And to just stand by and watch that happen is not going to happen.
Yeah, and that's really well said, Frankie. And then I think what I would add to that is that so this is my 4th feature-length documentary, and I always do conservation films. I mean, I've made a ton of other smaller things, but this is my 4th feature-length, and I always ask myself, what's my motivation? Because I've made them all for free, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm going broke doing this. But I always make the movie for one person. That's what I always try to focus on. Like, what's all this effort about? If I can cause one person in the audience to think to themselves differently about their connection with the natural world, then that's the dream for me. And so that's just what I've decided to do with film and video, is try to help create that connection, because I'm not ever pointing the finger at anyone. I'm also one of those disconnected people. We all are. When we're living in these square boxes and out of the woods, we're all sort of disconnected from things naturally by the way we live. Yeah. And so to me, when you ask what can people do, my answer would be, let yourself be affected by the movie. And for a lot of people, that's a good start, because, you know, there's just so much, like, there's never been a better time to get involved with conservation. There's so much to do. So I don't see things as hopeless. I see it as we just got to get more people involved, you know? So, yeah.
Well, speaking to you both, I mean, if your film is as compelling and engaging as you guys are, I don't think you're going to have a problem engaging and mobilizing, you know, there's not the next generation and the existing generation of shark fans. I mean, it's a truly inspiring thing, you know, not just to hear that you're tackling one particular cause head on, but also that you've managed to do this with a bunch of really inspiring people who have basically given their time and their energy and their passion for free. And that's exactly kind of what we do at the Daily Jaws, which is why we take great pride in trying to juggle that line or straddle that line of love jaws, but also love sharks. And we believe there is a coexistence there. And obviously we get the chance to speak to fantastic people like yourself.
Yeah.
So guys, thank you so much for taking some time out. I appreciate how close you are to the premiere. And obviously, Frankie, we know that it's probably like, I don't know, something ridiculous o'clock where you are, and you've been sitting there in the dark for 45 minutes now. So I'm gonna let you go. But before I sort of sign off with my usual sort of sign off, is there anything else you'd like to add? I mean, where can people find you? How can people find you, follow you, support you? Where can they watch the film? Tell us a bit about that.
So it's going to be a bit, we want to wait till all the screenings are finished in South Africa before we put it on YouTube. So what I would do is I would definitely, like, now that I have more time, Frankie, I'm going to start working on that newsletter that doesn't exist yet. So I would tell people to go to our website, thelastsharkdoc.com, and subscribe. And then soon someone will start putting together the newsletter. And then we can keep people apprised of exactly when the drop date is. But if you just follow our Instagram and our Facebook, that's another just easy place to find out when it's, because we will obviously announce it to the world that it's out there. I would say that's the big thing. Also, we do have a GoFundMe. And Frankie, if you just want to add what the GoFundMe, if they want to help support the work now, like we're at this point, we're never getting paid, and that's okay.
That's fine.
But Frankie's work could use some help. Frankie, do you want to just chat real quick about your GoFundMe?
Yeah, our GoFundMe, for our movie. But yeah, I mean, what we're really funding for right now is to kind of just help me get across the coast so that I can do all these screenings. But what's been really cool and just so surreal is the fact that all of our venues, all of our sponsors, everything's been donated so far. Even my flight here was donated to help me get here so that we could, share this with South Africa. We are definitely focusing on screenings across South Africa first and education here first before we go international. But what's been really cool is that there's been so much international interest already. I mean, Australia, the UK, Ecuador, Mexico, Egypt, because of that shark attack as well. Shark encounter. Egypt, because of that shark encounter as well. Thank you. I know. It is a little late for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's been super surreal. So yeah, also just follow on our socials because I have an amazing marketing team here that's been helping me so much. Again, like just really passionate people who saw the project and also jumped on to just help out for free. And so to just help us with gas money and such to get from screening to screening, yeah, or if you can donate to the GoFundMe. If not, follow along the page and support and continue to get educated and
Donate
follow along.
$5 for every time you've watched Jaws.
Yeah.
I would be bankrupt. But it's a good shout. Guys, thank you so much again for taking some time out and to help spread the word about this really important work that you guys are doing. What we'll do in the description, guys, I'm going to put a link to your website, the GoFundMe, and the social pages, and the other links that might be relevant to your work. I'm going to sign off now. So again, if there's anything else that you want to add or just give a goodbye, that would be fantastic.
Well, I just want to thank you, Ross. Like you reached out to us and said, literally, how can I help? And I was like, wow, what a stand-up guy. So thank you so much for your interest.
It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege as well.
Yeah.
Frankie, any last words from you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super just like my heart is like so warm right now. Thank you so much for reaching out. I mean, we appreciate all the help and it was so wonderful to chat with you. And it's always just so fun to talk about the film and see the momentum growing behind it. And yeah, we really appreciate this talk and it's been really lovely to meet you. And we can't wait to show you the film as well.
I can't wait to see it. Obviously, I've seen the trailer. I've watched it a few times, and it is an emotional watch. It's not like you say, like every other sort of shark documentary. So I think it is going to do the job. But viewers, what I'll do is I'll ask you to be the judge. I'd love you to watch the trailer that we're going to put a link to, and then when the movie goes international, we'll be back in touch with Charlie and Frankie, and we will be sharing any sort of ways you can watch that because it is going to be absolutely worth your time. So as always, guys, I've been Ross over at the Daily Jaws. I will drink to your legs